Hi guys, Medea here. Episode 3 of Medea's Musings. Today we're going to talk about the 5 keys to a successful performance. And I came up with this a few years back because a friend of mine and I were discussing how hard it was to look at our videos after our performances without getting super emotional about it and judgy and critical in a negative and non-productive way. And it's really helpful to watch your videos after you've performed because you can see where your strengths and your weaknesses are. You can see things like posture and whether it was really dynamic, whether you connected with the audience, those kinds of things. It's really helpful. It's just hard sometimes because we get a little caught up in the things that don't really matter and don't focus on the things that do matter. And what I mean by that is if we focus on things like the bits of your choreography that you forgot, that's not terribly helpful, because really when you're looking at your performance, you should see what you did do and not what you didn't do, because the audience doesn't really know, and so they don't care. They thought it was cool probably anyway. And that's something that you can maybe take a note of quickly. Yes, I forgot that bit, and maybe I'll try to remember to do it next time, but that doesn't actually help you constructively critique the actual performance you did. Okay, that makes sense. Also, we get caught up in things like maybe, get caught up in your back fat or your muffin top or other things that are more aesthetic and not necessarily helpful when you're reflecting on your performance later. So I came up with sort of a system of things to look for when you're performing or when you're watching a video after your performance or after a practice or rehearsal, in order to kind of break down in sort of a scientific way, even though dancing should be emotional and all about the heart. This keeps you sort of objective, and it becomes an objective way to look at what you've done or what you're doing and see where you could use improvement. And so I broke it down to 5 points. I have my cheat sheet because I often forget 1 or 2 of them. So the first thing is musicality. When you're looking at your performance, or, if you're, I don't want you to encourage you to like get all judgy on other people's performances, but I always sort of tend to do that at times, but to kind of stay away from the judgy-ness of it and maybe just think of things about other performers that you really liked and what you would learn from them. And so again, these are just kind of things to think about. But we're focusing on us, on what we did and what we're doing, not other people. So first one is musicality. How well did you know your music? Did you utilize each aspect or layer of the music, such as the melody, the rhythm, the lyrics, etc.? What is the mood of the music? Was there a story being told in the lyrics? Did you use either of those in your set? So how was your musicality? Second, dynamics. Was there a variety of or range of movement expressed in your piece? For example, slow and fast movement, large and expansive movement, as well as small internal movement. Were there level changes, traveling, spins? Did you take the opportunity to dance off the stage or in the audience, if provided? Did you milk the entrance and the exit? Did you take time to breathe and pause, or did it feel rushed? Or did it appear rushed? So what was the overall range of your performance? And to elaborate on that a little bit, if the music is super fast, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be moving fast the entire time. It's sometimes even more exciting when a performer uses the pauses or stretches it out a little bit so that it's more interesting than just constant movement all the time. Same thing if it's slow. Is there bits that are crunchier that you could speed up your tempo a little bit or your movements a little bit, or is it all slow? And how can you change that up and make it interesting? Okay, third, stage presence. Did you connect with your audience? Did you create drama? Did you tell your story? Did you shift focus throughout the room? Did you draw the focus in and out? Did your face express emotion? Did you utilize the stage or the floor? Stage presence is probably one of the most important things you could focus on when you're dancing, because, you know, pretty much anyone could have good technique if they just practice and do their homework and all that. But I think sometimes, well, oftentimes dancers will get caught up in the counts of the piece or working on their posture or their technique that they lose this. And this tells a lot of your story, and this is what connects with your audience. This is what draws them in, shows your emotions, shares what you're feeling. So kind of changing the focus every so often to sort of re-illustrate what you're trying to say is really important. So shifting focus could be, you know, at one point you're looking at the entire audience, and then maybe you look beyond the audience, and then maybe you focus on one person and you draw that person in specifically, and then maybe you look and you draw the audience into your space and you look at your hip as you're doing a Maya or something to draw them in and have them shift their focus to wherever you want them to focus. That's stage presence. That's grabbing them. That's telling them where to look and what to do, and including them in your story and including them in the narrative. Smiling when it's appropriate, scowling when it's appropriate. Shifting your gaze just in itself is powerful. So stage presence can be shared by just like the slightest head tilt changes your whole attitude. So again, stage presence is so important. All right, number 4, technique, obviously. How was your posture? How well did you execute your movement? Were you balanced, sharp, sloppy, rushed, poised? If you used any aspect of fusion, was it integrated well and represented respectfully? That's a big deal. So again, sometimes people get really focused on technique, and so they lose their stage presence, but the opposite could also be true. Sometimes they get really caught up in trying to emote so much that we lose our actual poise and our posture and the strength in the movements themselves, the isolations, and, you know, it could be rushed or it could be too loose. And so kind of finding that balance between really effective stage presence and also really, you know, impressive, solid technique is really important. So practice, practice, practice. Nobody's perfect, but practice makes really damn good. All right. Innovation. 5, innovation. So this is the part where you get to put in your personality into your piece. So were you able to add any sort of interesting nuance that made this piece unique? This isn't to say that you have to bust out and create some new style every time you dance. This is to say that, you know, your personality gets put into your performance every time you do it. So is there something about you that changes that vibe? Were you able to inject your personality into this in a new way? Was there something especially exciting about this piece? For example, was it a new fusion? Was there some strange movement you integrated that you never did before? Was there an odd music choice that you've never tried before, or just an odd music choice, you know, in general? That's sort of the point where you get to put in little style and innovation and nuance and flavor and, you know, a little bit of you into it. So that's number 5. So to recap, musicality, dynamics, stage presence, technique, and innovation. The 5 keys. Now, I must emphasize that this is the keys to a successful performance, not a good performance. I purposely didn't call it the keys to a good performance, because good is relative. Good sort of, again, brings in that emotional like feeling, like, oh, was it good? Did they like it? You know, I hate it. Oh my God, it's dreadful. And that again takes away from sort of the sort of scientific, objective aspect of it. Good is relative. Good is subjective. One person might love what you do, another person might hate it. It's always going to happen. So putting that pressure on you to always have this good performance is, you know, hard. So if you kind of see it as like 5 key factors, and if you got at least, you know, 3 or 4 of those things right on, I think it was a success. And later on, you can work on those things and have a fantastic performance. But if we come at it sort of in a scientific way, at least when it comes to critical assessments, I think it's really helpful. Later on, you can talk about how great it was. And, you know, it's good to have an emotional connection to what you do. And I think when you're on stage, it should be pretty much all heart. But when we're learning the craft, when we're performing, when we're critiquing it later, when we're coming down to, you know, breaking down the movements and the muscles and, you know, posture and body work, you know, it kind of has to come down to a scientific thing. And especially when you get to a point where you're performing, because, you know, in order to be a really successful performer, there's got to be a balance of all those things that I mentioned. So anyways, that is my 5 keys to a successful performance. So write those down and use those when you watch your videos next time. Okay. Good night. Mwah.